Here on the front facade, the doorways are recessed. You have nice overhangs on the main body of the building. Can you explain how, why those things were done?
Yeah, so we did talk about what you just mentioned as it relates to recess. I think the value of that is you're kind of shadowing the solar gain that comes into windows through the sun as it comes through. So recessing those in, you're a little bit out of the weather as you come into your home. You've got a space there to get under cover. The different components of board bat to stucco. Stucco is highly durable as it relates to the entry points and egress points. And so those are located where you would see the most traffic in the front of the home. Mm-hmm. We thought wood was a good component to treat as an accent as well. And so our railings are designed that way, the entry points, and you'll find that wood and metal mixed out throughout the subdivision, different access points that provide at times shade for homes or shades for the windows as that solar gain, but also give a nice added design feature.
Mm-hmm. And the roof slopes, you have a single slope roof here facing this direction, and all the units seem to have some thought put into which direction the roof was facing. What's that about?
Yeah, so this subdivision is all all electric. So this subdivision is all electric, meaning we wanted to take an opportunity to provide, if a family wanted to put PV solar on top, that our roofs be oriented in a way that can take advantage of that. So each of these units have a roof scoring, if you would, for to what degree we can bring in enough power to offset the footprint of the home's consumption in terms of energy. So that was part of the design. We didn't want them to look all the same. So how do you create a way for maybe these middle units to still have the same function and ability to provide PV solar where those that naturally face the sun have a little more advantage there. But we've been able to figure out how to do that and provide those chases throughout the home to the electrical panel. So those are all pre-plumbed, so what we would call a solar-ready home. We haven't ran the wire, we haven't invested in some of the high-end portion of solar or PV, but we've got everything ready to do that.
So if you want to make a home solar-ready, you make sure that you have a roof slope that's facing roughly south, maybe within 30 degrees of due south. You want to make sure that the roof surface doesn't have a lot of obstructions like dormers and vents and utility masts and things like that. You want to pre-wire. In your case, you ran a conduit down near the electrical panel so that you could run wires at a later date. So those are all the things that kind of make this solar ready.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And we're not professionals in that, so we really had to partner with Love Light Solar, helped us come in and think through this process. Anytime you're building a higher efficiency home, you need these contractors to come in. So our electrical contractor came in, and what does this look like? How do we accomplish what we're wanting? Disconnects have to be located for the fire department to come in and disconnect. Where's the most efficient place for that to go? And so it was a team of folks that came in to make these happen, but certainly couldn't have done it without Love Light Solar as it relates to their expertise. In fact, as we do our design consultation, we really give them, as the professionals in this arena of solar and PV, the floor space to come in and talk to the home buyers and say, is this something that would work for you? Now, we know that solar can be expensive, and so we really tried to look for a net 30, a net 60, or a net 0, or that the PV panels are providing 100% of the energy that's needed. And so there's different price points for families to kind of think through what makes sense for them right now. And it might be an investment in the future.
Water conservation is really important. It's getting more important every year. About 60% of the water use in most homes is outside the home for the landscape, especially in a dry climate like Boise. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the landscaping and how that's done?
You bet. What you'll see here is very minimal grass. We have a lot of drip system space, a lot of rock feature throughout the subdivision. I always want to make sure I can throw a football somewhere. So you need some grass, and that brings inherently just that feeling of home. But we've minimized those locations, and I think that's where a pocket neighborhood, that cluster of homes centered around a common space, provides that area for football or kids to play and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, for the landscape, plant selection is really important, and you've got a very small amount of turf. Turf's very water hungry, so you've minimized that. You're using some shrubby plants, and here's this kind of fruit tree here that is going to take some water, but will also grow up in order to shade the front of the building, but it won't grow up so high that it will shade the solar panels.
Yes.
So it's kind of a mid-sized tree. It looks like probably a prune or a cherry to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of those careful selection things that you can make early on with an eye to the future.
Yeah, indeed. And those are part of the discussions as you try to develop a subdivision. You can take them and put too much in, I think, and we've probably done that in the past, but to have them right-sized in the right locations and is imperative.
It's subtle, but there is one distinguishing architectural feature in that unit right over there. It's at the top of the wall, a little parapet wall.
Yes.
Was that to just distinguish that from the other units?
Combination. So that parapet wall does act as, I'm a standalone unit. I'm different than the surrounding, but behind that parapet wall, what you don't see is our HVAC system that hangs up there. Anytime you hit interior units like this, where do you put all of the outdoor, indoor units? Where do they connect and how can they connect? So in this case, we were able to put a little parapet there that allowed for that HVAC system to be installed behind it with appropriate drainage, and that can be accessible by a ladder pretty easily.
One of the key elements in a green home is the size of the building itself, because the less space you have to heat, you use less energy, you use less materials in a smaller home, and over time, many families have been raised in fairly small homes. I mean, a lot of us grew up in a family of 6 in a house that was less than 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
So while under modern standards, homes have grown quite a lot, but the size of the family hasn't grown.
Right.
So by right-sizing the home, we can actually save a lot of energy and a lot of resources. 1,800 square feet is a sweet spot for a family of, say, 4.
Yeah, yeah. Many of the subdivisions that we build are in older areas of the community. And to the point you were just speaking of, those older areas are smaller homes in general. So really, we're looking back at what we used to do and the sizes we used to build, and trying to bring in those energy efficiencies along the way.
But this home is intended for a family. About how big is it?
Yep, this one's about 1,500 square feet. And this subdivision was designed to be more family interactive as it relates to that. I mentioned that we have home buyer education, our home ownership center. They counsel folks through, last year was about 180 families purchased a home, and not just through us, but through the Valley. Some of the feedback we saw from that over the last few years have been, we need homes that are a little bit larger. And so our normal footprint is from 678 square feet, so a pretty small, efficient home, to upwards to 2,000, depending on which subdivision we're in. Those are mixed incomes, mixed use at times. But the value here at Flourish was we wanted those 3 bedrooms. We even have 4 bedrooms here. So it is more of that family-oriented subdivision, which hasn't always been the case for NeighborWorks, but we made an emphasis here to bring that product type to the market.
In a roof with standard framing, there's often very little space for insulation above the top plate and below the roof sheathing. In this case, we can see quite a bit of space there, probably enough for at least an R21 bat to be slipped in that space. This is called the truss heel, and that truss heel, sometimes it's called an energy truss or a raised heel truss, but that allows extra insulation to go into that space. One of the key benefits of this is not just that you get more insulation value, but it also, in a cold climate, it reduces the chance for you to get ice dams, because ice dams are caused by heat loss through the roof that melts the snow on top. Well, by putting extra insulation in there, you can now reduce that heat loss or even eliminate it, and the roof the snow won't melt on the roof. So it's really a durability issue as well as an energy efficiency issue.
Absolutely. It's purposeful. We know that when you do your images after we finish a home, those are the areas that have the most heat loss. And so to the degree we can raise the heel of that truss to get the insulation up over the top of that wall, you minimize that heat loss in that location. And it's an easy way to do it. It's an easy fix if we're paying attention to these details.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Truss manufacturers can do pretty much anything you ask them to do, but you have to ask them to do it.
Yeah.
And they'll probably charge you a little bit more for that extra thickness, but it saves so much grief and cost in the future. I mean, when you do one ice dam repair and you've paid for the entire cost of all those trusses, plus you've saved energy the whole time.
Yeah. In this instance, we've had to utilize the truss manufacturer to manufacture this, but there is another way to do it without requiring a specific heel truss or manufacturer to do that. But it literally is moving your pitch out a little farther from the home. That does a couple things. It keeps the drips from coming back and hitting your siding, but as you move that pitch farther out, you've inherently increased the gap between the bottom of the roof deck and the top of your wall, and you haven't really had to pay for the energy heel in this instance because there's a cost. But you can accomplish that by moving it out and changing your bearing points on your truss manufacturer design. Well, one of our advanced framing techniques is to make sure on our corners that we have opportunity for insulation to roll all the way to the outside corner and not just be trapped on either side of the corner, but allow that insulation to roll back behind the stud, which gives just another layer of insulation and keeping heat in the home and cold out of the home.
What type of insulation do you use?
So we use a blow-in insulation. The value to that is you're getting really tight and it's really custom fit to that wall type. If it's a larger opening, then we'll fill it. In this case, all of that will end up being filled with insulation, and it provides an opportunity to exceed the minimum in certain areas.
Dense pack insulation actually has a little bit higher R value than a bad insulation too. It's R23 as opposed to R21, which is what you see most for bats. The other thing that dense pack does is it blocks a little bit of the air leakage so that you don't get quite, it helps you a little bit with your air leakage package. The last thing that dense pack insulation does for you is that it really fills all the nooks and crannies. It's almost impossible to really get a good job of filling a cavity with a bat because it has to be cut and fit in there carefully. Insulators are working very fast, and the dense pack kind of takes care of that too. So it's R value, it's air leakage, and it's complete fill of the cavity.
It is, and we love using it. In the smaller homes, we've started using a spray foam, a one layer of spray foam to help us with our calculations as it relates to air penetration. And then on top of that, we come in with the blow-in, so you're able to fill in those cracks. It provides that sound barrier into the home, but certainly adds an additional insulation value as well.
Windows are one of the key elements in the thermal envelope of a building. A typical insulated wall can be anywhere from R21 to R50, and so we have lots of insulation and a very tight surface here, but over here you have a heat loss rate that could be 7 to 10 times greater. So windows are an important factor when you're kind of putting this whole thermal envelope together. A few of the features that are important with windows are the number of glazings, the types of coatings on the window, and also the filling between the glass panes. It's not terribly important to understand all the technology of windows because you have this handy sticker right here that it kind of encompasses all of those different features in one handy number. It's called the U factor. And in this case, the U factor is about 0.30. It's that little number right there. And if you just look at that number, you can kind of choose a window that's highly efficient. Now, the super high performance homes might have a U factor of less than 0.1. What I recommend people do is find the best double glazed window that you can afford. And that's going to bring your U factor down to about 0.22 or 0.23. That 0.23 window is going to have 2 panes of glass, about an inch of airspace between them. The surface of the window has 2 low-E coatings on it so that you get a lot of heat reflected back into the room, and the gas in between those panes is it's an inert gas called argon. And those features will bring this U value down to about 0.22 or 0.23 and give you probably the best real bang for your buck in terms of affordability in a really high performance window. Bud, what have you done with this window to make it efficient?
Well, we think windows are extremely important and part of that envelope, and the argon filled, double glazed, keeping moisture penetrations are pretty critical with the flashing on the outside of the window, that they're done appropriate, both for wind driven moisture and just stagnant moisture or rain. The light that they bring in, obviously you're not needing to use energy to light your home, and so we think that they're important, that they're placed appropriately, they're in the right spot. NeighborWorks, as we build our infill developments, we be very cognizant of where the neighbor's window is. And so when these windows start lining up, how do they lay out through their entire project? And can they get some good airflow inherently as from one side of the house to the other side of the house? And so those are considerations that we look at when we look at our window function.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like about this window is that it's fixed above and operable below. So the fixed part of the window has very low air leakage as opposed to operable windows. Yeah. And it's important to note that you don't need to make every window open and close. And yes. That if you are careful about how you distribute the fixed windows and the operable windows, you can reduce the overall air leakage of the building and still have good ventilation across, throughout the home.
Yeah, that's a great point.
What about the kind of flashing and the weather barrier? How does the window fit in with the weather barrier?
Yeah, for us it's a Tyvek model, and so that you're taking care of that window seal, you're getting the penetration points, as the corners are typically one of those areas that water can get in. There's opportunities for drain, so should water ever get behind there, you want it to drain out. And so being aware of how those are flashed and that you've got the appropriate layers from Tyvek to your seal around the window flashed appropriately, much like you would a roof. You treat your wall as a roof, and how would water flow, and we're very aware that this is a penetration as you would in a roof penetration in a wall, and making sure that those flashings are appropriate. In addition to the seal plate being sloped, I think is a pretty critical component too. Mm-hmm.